My sister has been engaged multiple times, but never married. When I finally got married before her, she ruined my wedding day. Then sent me a $5,000 therapy invoice blaming me for her depression. Can you believe some people? I recently got married to the man of my dreams, Daniel, and it was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But instead, it became this absolute battleground. All thanks to my own sister, Stephanie, who actually sent me an invoice $4,500 in therapy fees, claiming I had plunged her into deep depression just by daring to get married before her. No, I'm not making this up. Stephanie, she's 6 years older than me, and honestly, our relationship has always been complicated. Growing up, I didn't quite see it, but she was the golden child. Loved the spotlight. Me? I was happy in the background, quieter, more independent. I thought that kept the peace, you know? I never competed with her. But Stephanie's love life has been an absolute train wreck. Engaged multiple times, never made it to the altar. There was Mario, the first fiancé. They looked perfect, then boom, it fell apart. Stephanie was devastated. I was there, listening to her rant about how it was all Mario's fault. He wasn't ready to settle down. He changed. Never her. Then Theo came along. Charming, funny. For a bit, I thought, okay, this might be it. Nope. Crushed again. This time, she didn't blame Theo directly, but just wailed about how unlucky she was. Why does this keep happening to me? I always end up with the wrong guys. I tried to offer a different perspective, maybe it was timing or compatibility, but she wasn't having any of it. Most recently, there was Colin. He actually seemed like the one. Sweet, kind, a stand-up guy. I was genuinely optimistic. But a year later, another breakup. Devastated again, and this time she declared, it was his fault, not mine. I can't believe I invested so much into this. She'd say things like, maybe I'm just not meant to be in a relationship, or I must be doing something wrong, but I don't know what it is. There was always an excuse, never any real self-reflection or accountability. And through all of it, I was there. I tried so hard to be supportive, to hear her out. But the more she opened up, the more I realized she wasn't actually trying to change. She was just stuck in this endless loop of blaming everyone else for her relationship failures, completely ignoring her own role. So, when my wedding came around, I honestly expected her to be happy for me. I thought, surely, she'd put her own struggles aside, just for one day, and celebrate with me like any supportive sister would. Instead, she acted like it was the worst day of her life. Barely smiled in photos. Sulked in a corner for most of the reception. Left early without even a goodbye. At one point, I overheard her telling a relative how difficult it was for her to watch her little sister beat her to the altar. Like my wedding was some kind of competition she had just lost. It was beyond embarrassing, it was insulting. It felt like she just couldn't bear to see me happy. She made everything about her. After the wedding, things just spiraled. I started getting these ridiculously long texts from her, full of passive-aggressive comments about how I was ruining her life by getting married first. She kept saying I didn't care how it made her feel, that it triggered all her insecurities. I tried to be patient, I really did. I understood she was going through something, but it felt like she was blaming me for her issues. She even said, I was supposed to be the first one to get married, right? You just had to do it before me, didn't you? I mean, I get disappointment, but it felt like she was trying to guilt-trip me for something totally out of my control. My whole life, she's compared herself to me. I had a stable relationship, a good job, a wedding when I wanted one. Meanwhile, she's bouncing from one failed relationship to the next, and nothing I do is ever good enough. Then came the invoice. About a week after the wedding, I found it in the mail. From Stephanie. For $5,000 worth of therapy fees. She actually claimed it was the least I could do after causing her deep depression by getting married before her. I was absolutely floored. Speechless. I mean, I didn't ask her to go to therapy. I didn't make her feel anything about her relationship status. But somehow, in her mind, my wedding was the root cause of all her problems. She said my actions had shattered her self-esteem, and it was my fault she couldn't move on from her past. I went to my parents, my mom Margie and dad Eugene. They've always been incredibly supportive of Stephanie, especially with her relationship struggles. But honestly, they've coddled her. Every breakup, they'd rush in, tell her it wasn't her fault, someone better would come along. It never helped her take accountability, It just created this pattern of entitlement. When I told them about the invoice, they weren't on my side. Not at all. They said I was being insensitive, that I was an a-hole for not helping her out. They even went so far as to say they were reconsidering how they raised me because I wasn't supporting Stephanie. I couldn't believe it. I tried to explain this wasn't my fault, that it wasn't fair for her to ask me to pay for her therapy. I told them Stephanie needed to talk to them because they were the ones who set these patterns of dependency. But they just kept defending her, calling me cruel and unsympathetic. The whole thing was ridiculous. But what really stung was how they were treating me. I've always been the responsible one, independent, focused on my career, building a life I'm proud of. But instead of celebrating my marriage, they and Stephanie were acting like it was some kind of betrayal. Like I was supposed to put my life on hold to cater to her feelings. They wouldn't even acknowledge that Stephanie has her own issues to deal with. It's exhausting being blamed for everything not going well in her life. Daniel, my husband, was just as confused as I was. He said if the roles were reversed, he wouldn't dream of asking someone for therapy money over a wedding date. He was upset about how my family was treating me, too, and told me I shouldn't apologize or pay for anything just because Stephanie is unhappy. But my parents kept calling, making me feel guilty, saying they didn't want to pick sides. But I could tell. They were always prioritizing her feelings over mine. It made me feel so undervalued. So, Stephanie's still angry, and now my parents are mad at me. They tell me I need to be more understanding of Stephanie. But honestly, no one in my family seems to understand my feelings. I've always tried to be there for her, and I still love her, but this whole situation is draining me. I've reached my breaking point. I've dealt with her drama for years, but now I'm being punished for something I didn't do. I am not paying her therapy fees. She needs to deal with her own emotions and take responsibility. But no one seems to get that. Update 1*, there's something I realized after all this blew up. When Daniel and I first started dating, Stephanie seemed supportive. She'd ask questions, act happy for me, but she'd also make these little comments. Are you sure you're ready for something so serious? Or, you're so young, how can you know he's the one? At the time, I brushed it off, thought she was just being protective. Now, I know those comments came from a very different, very dark place. As Daniel and I got more serious, she started making jokes about how she needed to get married first, because the older sister should go first. I laughed it off, thinking she wasn't serious. But now, I wonder if she meant every single word. She'd also say things like, you're so lucky to have found someone already. Or, I wish I could skip the dating part and just find the right guy. I didn't think much of it then. But looking back, all the signs were there. She wasn't happy for me at all. I just didn't see it until everything exploded. Anyway, things got even wilder recently. We have a family group chat, right? A couple of days ago, I woke up to a massive wall of text from my parents. They basically accused me of ruining Stephanie's life. They started by saying how Stephanie has always been there for me, always looked out for me, and that my decision to get married before her was a complete betrayal. According to them, Stephanie has had such a hard time finding love, and by going ahead with my wedding, I stole her spotlight and made her feel even worse about herself. The message actually went on to say it was selfish of me to have my wedding at all, that I should have waited because the right guy for Stephanie was just around the corner. Apparently, it was my responsibility as her younger sister to step aside and give her her turn. I couldn't believe what I was reading. They made it sound like I was obligated to put my life on hold simply because Stephanie's relationships weren't working out, as if her personal problems were somehow my fault. The sheer entitlement in that message was unbelievable. So, instead of engaging with that mess, I ignored them. I didn't respond, just prayed they'd drop it. But of course, they couldn't tolerate being ignored. Later that day, my dad called me, and that conversation was even more infuriating than their message. He started by repeating everything from the group chat, claiming my wedding had come as a shock to the family. He said they didn't think I would go through with it so soon, and that Stephanie was blindsided. I immediately pointed out how absurd that was. I'd been engaged for a year. They were both actively involved in the entire planning process. They helped pick the venue, gave input on decorations, even came to my dress fittings. And, they received the invitation. My dad's response. He actually claimed they thought I was just pre-planning for a wedding that would happen a few years down the line. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Who spends a year planning a wedding they aren't actually going to have? I told him it made no sense, but he just brushed it off like it didn't matter. I even reminded him he was literally with me when I signed the venue contract, but he just ignored it. At that point, my mom joined the call, and things went from bad to worse. She started accusing me of causing irreparable damage to the family, and claimed it was entirely on me to fix it. She said my decision to get married before Stephanie had embarrassed them and made them question where they went wrong in raising me. I was shocked. My parents had saved money for my wedding, but I didn't even touch it. I paid for my entire wedding myself. I told her if they still had that money, they could use it to help Stephanie with therapy or whatever else she needed. But that wasn't good enough. They said it wasn't about the money. I needed to take responsibility for the emotional harm I caused. They actually expected me to pay for Stephanie's therapy out of my own pocket, as if I owed her something for simply living my life. By then, the conversation sounded so utterly ridiculous, I didn't even know what to say anymore. My dad kept insisting my wedding was a shock, that I should have waited, while my mom lectured me on how I'd damaged our family. It was like they had completely altered reality to make me the villain in this absurd story they concocted. I tried one more time to make them see logic, how unreasonable they were being, but they refused to listen. They were convinced I'd done something wrong, and nothing I said would change their minds. Finally, I just told them. I couldn't take any more of this nonsense. I said I was done with their unreasonable behavior and cut the call. After hanging up, I immediately blocked both of their phone numbers. And I asked Daniel to block them too, because I didn't want them trying to manipulate him. They haven't been able to contact me in the past 2 days, and honestly, it's been a huge relief. I feel a little guilty for cutting them off so abruptly, but I knew I needed to preserve my peace. Their behavior has been toxic and completely unreasonable, and I'm just done messing up my mental health to please them. Looking back, I can't believe how far they've gone to defend Stephanie. It's like they think the world revolves around her, and everyone else's happiness has to come second. I spent years supporting Stephanie through all her failed relationships, listening, trying to be there. But apparently, none of that matters. The moment I decided to prioritize my own happiness, I became the villain. And the fact that they expect me to fix this situation, one I didn't even create, is just the icing on the cake. I'm not sure what happens next, or if our relationship can even be fixed. Part of me hopes my parents will understand how unfair they've been. But another part wonders if this is just how things have always been, and I'm only now seeing it clearly. Whatever the case, I am sure of one thing. I did nothing wrong by choosing to live my life and focus on my own happiness. And I will not let anyone, including my family, make me feel guilty about that. Update 2 *. Okay. So remember when I blocked my parents? Guess who I completely forgot to block? Stephanie. I have no idea why, it just slipped my mind. I realized this about 5 days ago. She called me 27 times, all after midnight. I couldn't believe it. I didn't pick up, I just silenced my phone, hoping she'd eventually get the hint. But of course, she didn't. Daniel, on the other hand, couldn't put his phone on silent. He was expecting an important work call, no specific time frame, so he needed to be available. He was nervous about it, too. So, he left his phone on loud, and Stephanie took full advantage. She didn't stop calling. She kept trying from different numbers, desperately trying to get through. It got to the point where Daniel had to block her, too. But even that didn't end it. She just didn't give up. Eventually, we hit a breaking point. I was exhausted. Daniel was already stressed. So we just gave in. I called her back, hoping to get this over with and just go back to sleep. What I didn't expect was the conversation that followed. As soon as she answered, it was clear she was upset. She immediately started demanding $10,000 from me. My mind just went blank. $10,000. She said she needed the money because she'd gone to even more therapy sessions, and the cost was adding up. I was completely taken aback. First of all, why was she going to such an expensive therapist if she couldn't afford it? Why wasn't she looking for someone more reasonable? It made no sense. I told her, as calmly as I could possibly manage at that point, that I wasn't going to give her any money. She immediately started crying, saying how unfair everything was. She vented and ranted about how her dumb, little, unworthy sister had gotten married before her, and she just couldn't believe it. She was still stuck in her failed relationships and couldn't move on. She kept blaming everyone else, including me, the universe, and all her ex-fiancés. Mario, Theo, Colin. All of them were to blame, but never Stephanie. She refused to take any responsibility for her own choices. I wanted to scream at her, tell her to wake up and take control of her own life, but I just couldn't. By then, I was so tired. It was already 4 a.m., and I had absolutely no patience left. I told her I didn't have the time or energy to deal with her, that I needed to sleep. But she wouldn't let it go. She insisted I needed to do something because she couldn't afford the therapy anymore. She even said if I didn't help her, the therapist might report her to the cops for financial issues. I was speechless. How could she possibly think I would be responsible for her choices? I told her there was literally nothing I could do to fix her problems. If she couldn't afford the therapy, maybe she should consider finding something more reasonable. It was such an absurd situation, and I just didn't want to be part of it anymore. I told her flat out, "This is not my problem. You should have thought about the cost before you started seeing an expensive therapist." She kept pleading with me, saying she had no other options, that she was going to get into serious trouble. But I was done. I told her that if she called me again about this, I would contact the police before her therapist did. I knew I had to draw a line somewhere, and this felt like the only way to stop the endless cycle of drama. I did not want to get pulled into her mess anymore, especially not in the middle of the night. I blocked her number again, this time without hesitation. As soon as I hung up, I just tried to go back to bed, but I was too worked up to sleep. I kept thinking about everything Stephanie had said, and how she had placed all the blame on me, on the universe, on everyone but herself. I had been trying to help her for so long, but no matter what I did, it was never enough. She just kept asking for more, and nothing would ever fix what was wrong with her. It was exhausting, and I was just tired of being the target of her anger and jealousy. She never asked herself what went wrong. It was always someone else's fault, never hers. I tried so hard to be there for her, to offer support, but it was always on her terms. If I wasn't giving her exactly what she wanted, I was the bad guy. And now, after everything that happened with my wedding, everything she's done, I'm just done. I cannot keep letting her treat me like this. I don't know what's going on in her life, but I am not going to keep sacrificing my own peace of mind for someone who can't even acknowledge her own issues. I have tried, and I have been patient, but this is where I draw the line. If they reach out to me again, I honestly don't know what I will do. I'm so fed up with this situation. I can't keep being sucked into their drama, especially when it's so clear that they don't respect my boundaries or my choices. I am not sure how we got here, but I am not going back. I have made it clear that I am done, and I don't think I will ever look at my family the same way again. Update 3 asterisk. It's been about 4 months since that phone call with Stephanie. After all that chaos, I genuinely thought things might be settling down, but clearly, I was wrong. A few months ago, I got the terrible news that my dad had passed away. It hit hard. The funeral was held at my parents' house, and Daniel and I were both there. I wanted to be strong for my mother, who was absolutely heartbroken. Losing Dad was something none of us could have predicted, and it was a painful reminder of how much time had passed between us, especially since things hadn't been good for a while. Stephanie was there too, but she stayed in a corner with some relatives, looking really detached from everything. It wasn't completely unexpected, but it still felt bad. Mom was a mess, obviously, and I was constantly by her side, comforting her, trying to keep everything together. But despite everything, I couldn't believe Stephanie's behavior. She managed to make the funeral all about herself. It was supposed to be a time for family to come together, to be there for one another. Instead of reflecting on our father's life, Stephanie's sole focus seemed to be her own failed relationships. She would not stop talking about how awful her life was because of all the men she had been involved with. She was on a loop, repeating how unlucky she was, how all these men had failed her, and now she was completely alone. It's not that I didn't understand she was struggling. I did. But at Dad's funeral, in the midst of everything, it was just too much. It felt inappropriate, out of place, and completely selfish. What made it worse was she wasn't just keeping her thoughts to herself. She was telling anyone who would listen, pouring her heart out to extended family members who, frankly, didn't know what to say to her. It wasn't that they weren't sympathetic, but this was not the place or time for her to unload all her problems. I even overheard a few of my uncles talking about her, calling her selfish, saying she was making the funeral all about her. They were right, and it broke my heart. Dad's funeral was supposed to be about honoring him, remembering his life. But Stephanie had managed to turn it into another one of her pity parties. Dad and I didn't always get along, especially in recent years. But no matter what, I would never have disrespected him as Stephanie did. Even with our differences, I still respected him enough to focus on honoring him that day. What hurt the most was that Dad always defended Stephanie, right or wrong. To see her act so selfishly at his funeral felt like the worst possible thing. After the funeral, it was just Mom, Stephanie, Daniel, and me left at the house. Mom was talking about Dad, trying to hold herself together as best as she could. I could see how hard it was for her, and I wanted to be there, to let her talk, to share memories. But once again, Stephanie just couldn't stop talking about herself. She started complaining about how miserable her life was, how all the men she'd been involved with had ruined her, and how her life had no meaning. And I just had enough. I don't know what triggered it, but I snapped. I called Stephanie out right then and there. I told her she had no right to make this day about her. It was my dad's funeral, and she was acting like it was just another chance to complain about her life. I said some things I shouldn't have, but I couldn't keep it in any longer. It was like everything that had been building up over the years, her selfishness, her lack of accountability, the way she had always expected me to take care of her emotional mess, just exploded. To my surprise, Mom didn't take Stephanie's side. She didn't say anything, but she gave Stephanie this look, this expression of pure disappointment that I had never seen before. It was almost like she was finally seeing Stephanie for who she truly was, not the victim she always portrayed herself to be. And then, without another word, Mom just quietly went back to her room. Stephanie didn't know how to handle that. She started screaming at Mom, demanding that she defend her. I couldn't stand it anymore. I told her to stop, to back off, and leave Mom alone, because she was going through enough. It wasn't just about Stephanie anymore. The confrontation didn't end well. Stephanie was crying by the end of it, but honestly, I didn't feel bad. She deserved it. She had been selfish and completely inconsiderate of the fact that we were there to mourn Dad. Instead of showing any empathy or respect, she had made the day about her, and I couldn't let that slide anymore. I had tried so many times to support her, to understand her, but at this point, I couldn't keep letting her make everything about her own struggles. I was done. It's been about a month and a half since that day, and Stephanie has been quieter. She hasn't made any dramatic phone calls or sent any more messages. I don't know if she's finally coming to terms with the fact that I'm not going to tolerate her selfishness anymore, but I'm not holding my breath. Meanwhile, I've been spending a lot of time with Mom. I know she's still struggling, and I'm trying to be there for her as much as I can. She's doing her best to cope with the loss of Dad, but it's hard for all of us. The dynamics in our family have shifted. Things feel more broken than ever. Things just feel so sad now. I don't know how to fix things, or if they can even be fixed. I've reached out to Mom. I've tried to show Stephanie I'm still here, but I am not going to be a doormat anymore. I cannot keep enabling her, and I cannot keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. I just want peace, but I'm not sure if I'll ever get it. For now, I'll focus on supporting Mom and keeping my own life on track.